Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a Levi's tailor in California, and today we're going to talk about some basic denim terms. This is the stuff that I geek out about as a tailor all the time, so I'm excited to talk about fabrics and hardware and how garments are put together to give you a better idea of some of the terms that you might read while you're shopping online or browsing for jeans in person, and help you understand what makes jeans so special. The inseam is the seam along the inside of your leg, and the outseam is the seam that goes along the outside of your leg. The rise of a garment is the distance between the crotch point, which is where the four leg panels meet, and the top of the waistband. It determines where the pants sit on your body and determines where it looks like your waist is. It can make your legs look shorter or longer. It can also make your torso look shorter or longer. So a low rise is sitting at the hips or below, a high rise is up above the belly button, and a mid rise is usually around the belly button to a little bit below there. And our traditional fits are mostly mid rise. This area is the fly, and it's a button fly, which means it has this panel on the right wearer's side that has all the buttons, the panel on the left side that's all the buttonholes, and then the flap that goes over it, which is part of this right hand panel. So the J-stitch is the construction method that holds all of that together, and also it's the method that allows this flap to be able to cover up the buttons so that the buttons are not exposed while you're wearing it. Shank buttons. So this style of button sits slightly away from the surface of the fabric. That little gap actually helps quite a bit when you're trying to button something that's tight. Rather than just sewing the button on through holes that are in the button itself, it's pierced through the garment and clamped into place. Rivets are the small metal fastener that was part of the original patent for blue jeans. They're often put in places that have a lot of tension or a lot of wear to strengthen the garment, keep it from tearing, and make it last longer. Top stitching is any style of stitching that sits on the visible outside of the garment and is visible when you're wearing it. Levi's top stitching is traditionally a gold or orange top stitch that contrasts with the indigo, and it is very much a decorative element, but it is also a structural element. All of the top stitching is structural in nature. This seam, actually, this type of seam, is something else I want to talk about. It's called a felled seam. So here with the felled seam, top stitching works in tandem with the construction to form denim's traditional double flat felled seam. In this seam, so you can see, you don't see the edge of the fabric at all. The two ends of the fabric come together and they fold under one another. And then the stitching is done on top of those to hold that lock in place. And that's called a felled seam. And the stitching that's done on top of it to hold it flat is what makes it a flat felled seam. And this construction adds a lot of strength to the garment because there aren't any extra edges that are out in the open to fray. Let's talk about a few different types of stitching that are used in construction. First of all, there is the lock stitch, which is a traditional straight stitch done on a sewing machine. In denim and in industrial machines, what that means is that there is a top thread and then there's a bottom thread. And those threads are actually traveling in the same direction. The bottom thread loops around that needle and catches the top thread, and they lock. But where they lock is inside of that piece of fabric, so you can't see it. So what it looks like is just continuous row of stitching over straight lines, and you don't see where it's looped together, but that loop is what creates the strength that holds the stitch in place. You can see on the front, it looks like these two rows. On the back, it looks very much the same. In contrast to the chain stitch, on the front side, it'll look very similar. It'll look very much like the lock stitch. Usually they're set to be the same stitch length also, so that you can see, but then when you flip it, you will see that these two rows of stitching are little chains. They are not straight, short straight lines at all. And what happens is that the thread on the underside is looping back and forth, creating a continuous chain along the inside. And it can actually be pulled out quite easily if you know where to pull the thread from. Whereas a lock stitch is strong and very tedious to remove. So it depends on what your long-term goal is for a garment, what type of stitching you're going to use. It's also sometimes a comfort choice because the chain stitch is bulkier on the inside, so you don't necessarily want it sitting in certain parts of the garment. Lastly, I would like to talk about the BARTACK. A BARTACK is a close series of stitches that add strength and reinforcement to a garment, especially in places of high tension or high wear. Let's talk about a couple of branding signifiers that are unique to Levi's denim: the ARCUATE and the red tab. The ARCUATE is the stitching pattern found on the back pocket of Levi's jeans. The other element I want to talk about is the red tab. On jeans, you'll always find it on the wearer's right backside pocket in this same position. This was introduced as a way for Levi's customers to be able to easily identify true Levi's jeans. It's long been a mark of quality and Levi's standards of craftsmanship. Warp yarns and weft yarns are the two basic components of any woven fabric. These terms refer to how the yarns are positioned in the loom while the garment is being woven, and also how they're positioned when the garment is cut and sewn and how it sits on your body. The warp yarn is the lengthwise yarn, and that's what is held in tension inside of the loom while the fabric is being woven. The warp yarn is going to be what's lengthwise along your body, so it will be vertical along your body. The weft yarn is the crosswise yarn that sits over and under and over and under the warp yarns, and the weft yarn is what is actually moving in the loom when the fabric is being woven. The most basic type of weave is the one-to-one weave. So in the one-to-one weave, the warp yarns would be sitting in the loom with tension, and the weft yarn on the shuttle would be going over, under, and the next yarn would do that, but opposite, so go under, over, and that's what creates that locking grid and creates the strength of a woven fabric. Twill weave is a type of weave that creates a diagonal pattern on the surface of the fabric. When we see a denim twill, that's a continuous twill, and so it continues in the same exact pattern and creates one long diagonal line across the fabric. When we talk about other types of twills, those are broken twills. So broken twills are things like herringbone, which have a pattern that goes diagonal down, diagonal up, also called right hand or left hand, so it'll switch back and forth between a right hand and a left hand twill to create a pattern that looks like a bunch of V's instead of one continuous diagonal. The denim twill and the style of twill allows us to have the front or the face surface of the fabric that is very blue, while the inside or the wrong side of the fabric that sits against the wearer is lighter color. Usually it's a natural undyed cotton. So this is why we have the noticeable difference, and it's part of why we get those beautiful fades. So a traditional denim twill has the warp yarn traveling over 3 of the weft yarns and then under 1. And so since it's a 3-to-1 ratio, and since the warp is much heavier, you're getting far more visibility of that darker indigo dyed warp yarn on the front. Next, I'm going to talk about selvage. So selvage denim is a special type of denim that it's made on a specific loom that finishes the edge of the fabric as it weaves the fabric. This is the traditional style of denim. Looms used to be much narrower than they are today. The different colors that sit on the outside of the selvage were signals from the manufacturer as to what company they're making the fabric for. So Levi's selvage is almost always going to have this lovely red line through it. This is our classic traditional selvage. And this is what you'll see on the outseam of a special selvage garment. Denim weights. Denim is weighed in ounces per square yard. Lightweight denims tend to be summer weight denims, and those are under 12 ounces. Midweight denims are more standard, they're between 12 and 16 ounces, and heavyweight denims are anything that's over 16 ounces per square yard. Now, with the introduction of more stretch garments and tighter fitting garments, denim weights tend to skew a little bit lighter these days, and many people find heavier weight denims pretty uncomfortable to wear, which can make it be kind of like a badge of honor among people who really love denim. So like the heavier the denim, the more die-hard of a denim fanatic you are, because they can be very uncomfortable and hard to break in. So if you're wearing really heavy denim, that means you're very serious about your denim. Raw denim is denim that is unwashed and untreated. So when you get something from the mill in a roll form, it's usually going to be something that has not been washed or treated unless otherwise specified, and it'll be really dark. You won't have any fading happening, and it'll be stiff. So that is another way that it can be a little bit uncomfortable to wear. And some other die-hard denim lovers might wear their jeans for a long time before washing it for the first time. So I've seen people who stick with 10 wears before they'll ever wash it. I've seen people who will wear it for a year before they'll ever wash it. So they want to keep it raw as long as possible so that it will form to their body and start fading to their body and to their movements. On the flip side, most jeans that you're going to see in the market have been washed or treated in some way. Let's talk about stretch in jeans. Non-stretch, the traditional standard version of denim, is 100% cotton. Sometimes it's cotton blended with polyester, but it doesn't have any stretch fibers incorporated into those yarns. Whereas a stretch fabric is going to have 1 to 3% elastane spun into the weft yarn. So it's going to stretch horizontally along the wearer's body. The stretch is spun into those yarns before the fabric is even woven, so it's an inherent quality of the weft yarn is that it is stretchy. Okay, fades and whiskers. Let's talk about how denim fades as we wear it. The wear pattern in denim, it's the fading that happens over time as the top layer of indigo on those warp yarns is sloughed off as you wear it. So what happens is, as I'm wearing this and I'm bending my legs and I'm sitting, I get these fades, which we like to call whiskers. Everything that's along the top block are whisker fades. And then I also get these lovely fades along the back of the knee, which these are also pretty straight across. On jeans that aren't quite as tight, I would be getting what we like to call a honeycomb pattern. Basically what the fades tell you is a story about the person who wore these jeans and how they wore them. Okay, so let's talk about a few construction elements. First of all, the yoke. This area back here is the yoke, and that creates shape in the back. Slubs are irregularities in a fabric that result from parts of the yarn that are thicker than others, usually parts of the warp yarn that are thicker than the rest of the warp yarn. And this creates an uneven surface, usually in the form of a small bump or bulge in the fabric. As yarns are spun, as fabric is woven, it's checked, and it goes through a process of being checked to make sure that there aren't slubs in there that we didn't mean to have in there. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which is just the 5-pocket jean in general. And this is the standard construction method for a pair of jeans. The 5 pockets that we typically see in a pair of 5-pocket jeans are the 2 back pockets, which are patch pockets sewn on, the 2 front pockets, which have the pocket bags, and then this little watch pocket, sometimes called a coin pocket, which sits inside the wearer's right front pocket. And so denim combined with this construction is what makes a pair of jeans a pair of jeans. You can play around with those elements, and there's a lot of room for interpretation and creativity within the framework of what makes a pair of jeans a pair of jeans.